Well, coming out of the Game Developers Conference, it seems some new technology to make your games even harder to pirate. Yes, it seems Devuno coming out with new technology for their digital rights management system that's going to cause a stir because now, if you leak something online, it's going to be invisible to trace. Well, before we get fully into this, do me a favor, subscribe to the channel. The more you subscribe, the more stories I can bring you guys. Now, recently in the news, we had Yuzu, which was an emulator system that got sued by Nintendo, and they settled for $2.4 million over the emulation of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Now, generally, a emulation of a game isn't going to be that big of a thing, but what the underlying story was this game, and this emulation of the game came out about a week before. So now it seems out of the Video Games Developers Conference, we have Devuno, DRM, the digital rights management maker, cracks down on game leakers with new tech, Tracemark for gaming, puts a watermark on games to unmask its source. Now, I've taken part in a few games now and again where there is sensitive material in it, and when you're playing it, you get these watermarks that bounce around the screen. It gives an identification that you have this game. And so this is nothing really new, but what might be new about this is they're incorporating a visible or invisible watermarking techniques that can make it possible to identify the leaker from a single clip or screen. That's kind of scary when it comes down to these leaks. Now, everyone doesn't necessarily like the leaks. Look at what happened with Grand Theft Auto 6. The leaker is in jail, but he is not fit to stand trial, so he's in like a mental hospital over it. It's a very strange and unique story in that sense. IDO 2, developers of the heavily maligned Devuno DRM continue to pop up in the headlines, this time by debuting a new game watermarking system during the 2024 Game Developers Conference in hopes of putting an end to today's climate of high-fidelity game leaks during pre-release periods. We're seeing leaks happen quite often, but we see this across the entire gaming industry. It's not just video games. If you follow Magic the Gathering, it seems every day there's a new leak. Now, while Devuno DRM is quite rightfully disliked due to its negative gaming performance impacts and occasional tendency to break mods or other factors of experiencing of paying customers, especially what we're seeing with Capcom, where they're going through a bunch of their back catalog and adding it to their games, completely breaking it on the Steam Deck, which absolutely is horrific. Tracemark at least sounds like something not likely to make the gaming experience any worse. Not by itself anyway, though it seems highly probable that any game using Tracemark for games during development will also use Devuno's proper DRM come launch time, which is a worst-case scenario for DRM critics. The digital rights management system that gets added to these games, the games come out and then they're just poorly optimized. We recently saw Dragons Dogma 2 come out, and I've watched a few of them, and then the game get capped at 30 frames per second. They say we can't optimize it anymore because of things that are in the game, and it needs to be the lower down. Everything that we have for our gaming specs, you go out there, you buy these expensive gaming specs, but then you're not allowed to play the games at higher than 30 rates per second because they say the optimization doesn't need to happen on these games. But that's been the biggest drawback. We want to see games at 60 frames minimum because that's going to have the least amount of video lag to perception of what we see in our eyes. Anything lower than 60 frames per second, you can then start to see buffering and clipping and lag in these games, and that's why Devuno is such a bad thing when it comes down to it. Even though they do say that it doesn't draw it down, but anytime you run an overlay for any game, it really does draw it down. This type of thing where they're adding in this trace mark that's an invisible mark in the gaming, it's a very interesting thing to hear about, that this is new technology, and one of the things that came out of the Game Developers Conference. So how does trace mark for gaming actually work? Tracemark enables precise tracing of any leaked material back to its source thanks to the visible or invisible watermarks that serve as identifiers. According to them, these should still be detectable even after the image has been cropped, compressed, blurred, etc. Of course, they recommend using a Devuno anti-tamper DRM alongside Tracemark for gaming during the development process, hoping for a one-click solution that will discourage content and game leaks. So what happens here? I don't truly understand. I guess these game leaks get pushed out to someone, then they leak it online. The person that leaks it online not necessarily is the source, but then it's going to be traceable back to the source. I mean, this could be good, but anything to do with Devuno and DRM, these digital right managements, generally are not good in the long run. I don't know. For the most part, this news isn't bad. Developers are well within their rights to keep the games confidential, and we've seen many major profile leaks in the past few years that mainly only serve to force game developers and publishers' hand. Fighting this issue may involve more widespread adoption of Devuno, though, which no PC gamer in their right mind will be happy about. And that is exactly where we go with this. No one wants Devuno in their games because it just brings down the frame rates, it poorly optimizes your games, and overall it will just be a bad news bear sort of in this case. This trademark, I don't know. If they can put in an invisible watermark that's going to track leaks, I gotta say, that's kind of a good thing. But because it's coming from Devuno, you gotta take it with a grain of salt and go, I don't know. I just don't know if this is going to be a good thing in the long run, because it means optimization and frame rates are going to suffer. Now, is this tracemark actually going to stop leaks? I don't think so. I think this is just an excuse for them to continue to put Devuno in your video games, and it's just going to drive more reasons for the optimization, an excuse for the optimization for video games to be poorly managed on PC. This is something that has been going on for a while now, and it seems when games are at 30 frames per second, it just suffers and it just does not perform the same way. The games, you pay lots of money for these games, especially with like Dragons Dogma 2, where they then turn around and microtransaction the hell out of the game. But then you're paying up to $100 for these games in the first place. I think there's a price point that a lot of these games are just hitting right now that is just too much, and that's why the games are being leaked. That's why they're being pirated, and Devuno doesn't help the case. A lot of people take it upon themselves at this point to crack Devuno. It becomes a challenge for them to remove that software from it, and then in the process, it becomes pirated. So where does that really lie? Where does putting in an invisible watermark in these games going to really change the matter that these games still will be leaked? You're going to have games getting hacked. You're going to have people completely hitting it overall. You want to prevent the piracy, put the game at a decent price point and someone won't pirate the game. People will be more willing to shell out what it's worth. But if you overcharge for it, add in thousands of microtransactions into these games, and people are just going to say, no, I don't want to pay for that. I'm not going to do this. And it continues down that line. Anyway, I'm your proud Canadian Phoenix, Cindershadow. I'm signing off here. Have yourselves a great day. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you again very soon.